Are you an Attack on Titan superfan? When you watch Shrek, do you only watch the scene where the dragon swallowed Farquaad whole? If so, Sleep Token Vore might be for you. And if you know why, you know why. And if you Google it, it's your own choice. Mark with Carter Vox Academy here, and today we're doing another Sleep Token song because this song, Vore, people have been sending to me and saying like, hey, you should check this out. Hey, you should do it. Because in the last video I did, where I reacted to Sleep Token, I mentioned that I'm not like the hugest Sleep Token fan. So we're going to check out Vore. People are saying it's the heaviest song they've ever written. Of course, I like a lot of music that's not super heavy. I'll check it out. I'll give in. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name is Mark. I am a metal vocalist myself. I'm in a band called Kardashev. We're on Metal Blade Records. We released our first album with them last June. It's been almost a year. Holy cow. And I am also a full-time vocal coach. I specifically... Well, 90% of what I teach is harsh vocal technique. So teach people how to do a lot of deathcore, death metal, like, types of vocals safely and efficiently with all sorts of cool techniques and exercises. I also do this channel where I react to vocal technique. But anyways, if you like the content, like, share, and subscribe. It means a lot to watch the channel grow. We do have a Patreon, which gives you access to our Discord server, which has tons of people all around the big circular globe, spherical globe that we live on. And we have events all the time, all throughout the week. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, that's all I got. So I think let's just go ahead and get into it. That's enough for me. Sleep Token, Vore. Here we go. Okay, yeah, this song's dope. You know what? Even if my total opinion on Sleep Token isn't changed, this song is fire. Also, because we talk about vocal technique, I pause a lot, so if you don't like it, skedoodle. Anyway, so yeah, let's talk about those screams at the beginning. Now, the first thing that I really love is how they're mixed and how they're layered in. On this channel, we cover a lot of like deathcore and a lot of not exclusively deathcore, but a lot of deathcore, a lot of metal that's very vocal forward, right? And Sleep Token is very vocal forward. The lead singer, he's one of the greatest parts about it, and one of the things that people kind of fawn over the most, right? So hearing these screams sort of mixed in, verbed out with maybe a touch of extra gain on them, sounds really, really nice. I am a big fan of like somebody told me that this song had a very like strong black gaze feel to it, like black metal, shoegaze mixture. And I so far would agree. And I love that sound. Now, one thing that'll happen, if we can have the most intuitive ear in the world, right? We can really have the most intuitive ear in the world. And when we listen to vocals, especially heavily distorted vocals that have effects on them, which effects are not cheating, oftentimes we can sort of fill in the blanks or hear what we want to hear. However, in this space, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear to me anyway, what's going on. What we have is we have a very high, very focused, very loose distortion. At this point, when we get to these types of screams, the names get a little bit dicey. Some people would call this fry. Some people would call this false chord. To me, when I do this high distortion, I'll give you a couple examples here. When I do this high distortion, it doesn't feel like fry at all. And it doesn't really feel like that low gravelly bassline false chord that we have either. It sounds like something different. Now, you can achieve this same sound. I have seen it done, and I've talked with people and seen people start with fry and then lift, and people start with false chord and then lift, because it's a lot more about where you'll end up than where you start. Now, To give you an example of what I mean, I hear the same type of scream and I hear the same type of distortion, but with balances of distortion in true voice or distortion in true chord phonation and distortion where there is no true chord phonation underneath. And for anybody who's curious, true chord phonation, the sound of your true chords coming together and vibrating under or through the airflow, or as the airflow from your body goes through them, that's the sound of your speaking voice. That's true chord phonation. If I take a high scream, very similar to what he's doing here, to the best of my ability to hear through what's going on, and I have no true voice underneath, it's going to sound something like this. Right? Now, when I am doing that, one thing that's very important to notice is I am not squeezing the glottis. The glottis is the space here that your vocal folds make their home in. And one of the biggest things that we see with singers who want to sing high notes or singers / screamers who want to scream high notes is that they crank down on this. And to a degree, that's kind of intuitive. It's wrong, but it's kind of intuitive because after all, like if you think about something that's tight and thin, it's going to make a higher pitch, right? So you pluck a guitar string and you tune it up, tune it down. The tensility, the tension on that string is changing, and that's causing it to have a shorter frequency or a longer frequency, right? So it makes sense that if you're not sure how to approach high notes or high screams, that you would squeeze your vocal cords, right? But you actually don't need to do this. A lot of this shift happens from placing your support underneath your scream, right? So utilizing I've got a lot of videos. Maybe I'll talk more about it here in a second. But understanding how to connect the movement of your abdominal muscles, the support from underneath, to your voice as it lifts up and out. Hey, ah. You can see how I'm bouncing up and down there. That's from the squeezing of my abdominal muscles. And then from there, understanding how to shift your tone predominantly with your resonance, predominantly with your tone and your timbre, right? So for example, I can start here, super relaxed, right there. Now my larynx did lift slightly, right? It'd be disingenuous to say that it didn't, but there was no point where I really cranked down on my vocal cords, right? What I did is I shifted my voice up and forward. I felt it sort of buzzing around in my nose, and in doing so, I was able to bring out a lot of bright qualities to my voice without having to squeeze my vocal cords. Now, again, I've heard this scream approached multiple ways. I'm going to approach it the way that I generally do, which is with a really fundamental, doesn't have to be super cool sounding false chord growl. Right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that same shift, right? The tongue is going to raise in the back. The larynx, I'm not going to think about moving the larynx. I'm not going to drive the car with my larynx, but my larynx is going to lift slightly. And I'm going to shift my resonance up into my nose, up into this place right here. Here we go. I also open up my mouth and to show my teeth, right? And we can play with the balance of vocal cords engaged in that scream, but we want to make sure that we're not getting the distortion from the vocal folds, right? So we can do screams that are just pure distortion, right? Or I can add a little bit of voice to it, right? And in doing so, it's very important that I understand that my distortion is coming from tissues above the vocal folds, even with these high vocals, like in the back of the mouth, the postpharyngeal space. And my distortion and my voice is not, my vocal cords are not creating the distortion involved in this scream. Now, one thing, you can see me kind of doing this a little bit. One thing is that some people, their spit gets super foamy, right? When I do high screams like this, if I'm not super duper hydrated, stay hydrated, friends, my saliva will get kind of foamy. So anyway, there's a lot more I could talk about, but let's see where this song goes. I'm going to go back maybe 10 seconds because it sounds like we have a cool transition coming up here. So here we go. Okay, that's a really cool spot. I'm gonna keep it kind of simple here. In the last Sleep Token video, I didn't really talk about the singing a whole lot. Just because as like a harsh vocal coach and predominantly a harsh vocalist, sometimes fandoms get really spicy when I talk about the clean singing. But I promise I only have good things to say. Um, Now, one of the main things that I heard in this section, obviously, he did have that flip to head voice, which was super awesome, and embraced the vocal break. By the way, let me tell you this: so many singers are like terrified of their vocal break. Right? I do give some like fundamental singing lessons, like it's a small portion of what I do. But if somebody like they're just like, hey, I just want to sing on pitch. I just want to I just want to know how to not strain my voice, and I want to be able to like switch registration. I help with. I'm more than happy to help with that. But what I will say is that so often, like people, like students will come in and they will act like they are failures if they have a vocal break, if they have that like, and it always perplexes me because like, this is kind of a hot button topic, but I don't care about the vocal break unless you care about the vocal break, right? Now, if you're going to be very involved in like classical singing or you're going to be very involved in like opera or something, then you're probably going to spend a lot of time smoothing that out. And even if you're going to be in more contemporary styles, it's not harmful. It's not a bad idea to learn how to move through that vocal break easily and efficiently. That being said, I'm absolutely getting blown up. Get away. That being said, don't be worried about it too much if you're going to be in more contemporary styles. And the reason for that is because vocalists sound awesome. Awesome. We just heard it here with his little flip to head voice. The singer of Leprous, Einar, like he uses his vocal break, and even though it's very apparent and he's bouncing off it like a springboard, it is buttery and it is smooth. So that's one thing that I just really liked, and that I think the singer does really, really well here. Now, along with that, one thing that he does is his chest voice is very, very strong, and I think it's because, I think the reason I like it so much is because it sounds like an embellished speaking voice to me. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, right? I don't remember any of the melody, so I'm not going to kind of, if we get later and it brings in my head, I might kind of show you an example. But one of the best things we can do when we're learning to sing is we can learn to sing, to speak on pitch, right? So we can, I don't have my like little keyboard, but we can just sort of speak, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. Just, simple stuff. Does it sound super cool? No, not really. But over time, we can slowly add embellishment. We can slowly add resonance shifts. We can learn to open up in the back to warm up the tone. We can add little bits of vibrato like we heard here. Anyways, I'm going to see if there's some melody that I can pick up on and actually remember. I get really excited and I forget things because I'm kind of spacey. But yeah, there's a lot of really strong, really relaxed chest voice here, and that was very, very cool. Also, the gritted teeth. I wonder if that's like a theme because he did it in the last song where he sort of like breathed and sang through gritted teeth, and now he kind of did it at the beginning of this section here. Anyway, let's keep going. Okay, we've got another good transition point there. I'm going to keep this one really, really short, but there was a good example of what I was talking about, right? So he gets into like a kind of a belty space that's really rich, really, really nice, sounds excellent, right? Now, that can be kind of that can be kind of an intimidating place to approach. But if we think about, I'm actually going to go back here for a second. Our editor will cut this out, but I just want to hear that melody one more time. So start the cut here. Okay. Bring it back in. Okay, so anyways, I kind of found the section that I was thinking about. So it can be kind of intimidating for us to approach like sort of higher notes in sort of a belty projected fashion, right? I don't really know that I would call this like full belt territory, but there is definitely some projected singing going on here. One of the best things that you can do is you can get comfortable just calling out to a friend. I talk about this all the time because it's a really useful exercise for metal vocals as well. But you can sort of like, hey, hey, buddy, hey, what's going on? Hey, ho, yo, whoa, yo, right? If you kind of listen to that, now I'm just kind of riffing around, but that was just my calling out voice. Right, that was just my calling out to a buddy voice. I'm going to paint Warhammer minis, and I see my buddy at the back of the shop, and I'm being a little rude, and I'm just like, hey, man, whoa, what's up? It's just your calling voice, and you can do a little bit of embellishment there. You can shift resonance forward, you can shift it back, you can open up to warm, you can close up slightly to brighten. You can do all sorts of things, right? But don't be afraid of your speaking voice and using your speaking voice as a springboard for good singing. And then over time, as you lift, you're eventually going to hit a space. You're eventually going to hit a space where you're going to have to shift into head voice, which he does exceptionally well. And he had like a very like bright, a very like strong heady mix. That's a little bit less of my territory, so I'm not going to try to do that myself. But kudos to him. It sounds really good. I'm just going to pick up from this space because it's a good song, and we're going to keep going. Let's talk about that real quick. So one thing that the Sleep Token singer is really really good with is just all sorts of head voice sounds, whether he's projecting and like it again in like a sort of mix, like a heady mix space, or he's like he was right there, lighter, more delicate, softer. He's got a lot of control over his head voice. And I will say, I can't remember the name of the release, but the release that Thread the Needle is on, his head voice sounded great there, but it sounds a lot stronger here. You can tell he spent a lot of time on it. Now, if you are trying to access your head voice and you can't, or you're having some difficulty with it, it's kind of important to know what's going on here. So in our vocal anatomy, we have different sets of muscles, right? We have the CT, cricothyroid, and then we have the TA, thyroarytenoid. And the CT muscle is more responsible for chest dominant sounds, hey, right there. And the TA muscle is more responsible for like heady voices, whoo, hey, right? More in that space. So one mistake that a lot of people make is they think that if they just keep pushing, like most people can do this, pew, 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 or boo, woo. Most people can do that. However, I've met and worked with people who can't. And if you can't, it's okay. Your voice isn't broken or anything like that. What it just means is that muscle and that space may just be really unfamiliar to you. It may not be coordinated, may not have the strength that it needs, right? So a mistake that people will make is they'll try to sing in their head voice and they'll just slam at it. They'll just like run at it as hard as they possibly can. And it doesn't really work very well. Now, one thing you can do, there are a lot of different ways to play with it, but one thing you can do is just kind of think about, rather than starting way up high in your head with the note that you think you should have, like, I don't know, woo, high, woo, right? Start a little bit lower. Start with your chest voice and just sort of inch forward and think about like doing like a little baby coo. You know, it's funny because people like I've got a 5-month-old. I've never heard it actually say coo. And I've never heard it coo like this, but this is like kind of thought of as like a baby cooing noise. But you can kind of just go, you know, so my chest voice, hey, 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 hey. It's starting to get kind of breathy there. Hey, I'm doing this soft. I'm not worrying about the vocal break. Hey, woo, right there. Woo, 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 woo. It's not a very high note, and it's very, very relaxed. I'm not squeezing my throat at all to make that happen. And so, if you're someone who those like lighter spaces are really, really difficult for you, that's one thing you can do. Now, I will also say along with that, if you find that you lose your headspace, if you find that that headspace is difficult for you after screaming or singing, not before, but after, or that despite your best efforts and doing everything right, it still feels really raspy, or it still feels like it just won't connect. When you try to do those head voice spaces, you may want to get scoped, because one thing that can happen when we're starting to see, now I'm not a doctor, I'm not a speech therapist, I'm not an ENT. So the best I can do is give you some things to look out for, and then you go get a medical opinion from a medical professional. But one thing that can happen when we're starting to see some vocal damage on the actual vocal cords, right, is that we lose access to those spaces. And, you know, maybe we'll find that our voice is getting a little bit raspy when it's not supposed to be. Could be something as simple as acid reflux. Let me tell you, my body is an acid reflux factory. I've made tons of dietary changes. And, you know, it's something that, like, if I am like 100% regimented is fine, but I eat one piece of pizza after 8. My voice is going to be buzzy for a while. But the important thing is that if you're having issues with that, you go to a medical professional so they can tell you. They can say like, oh, it's just acid reflux, change your diet. Or they can say like, hey, I'm starting to see some, you know, some chatter on these vocal cords. They're not looking like they're connecting properly. You may want to get some specialty help from a speech therapist or something like that. Important to do. And honestly, I think that every professional singer, even hobbyist, if you're like a big time hobbyist, you know, maybe every 6 months, maybe once a year, probably more than once a year if you're like, you know, your voice is your job. I should do it more than once a year. But just get them checked, even if you feel fine. Just get yourself checked. Vocal health is a good thing. Anyways, let's keep going. I don't know what the story is with like this like Zerg lady. But it's like a Hydralisk mixed with Kerrigan. But I dig it. So there, that's all I know.
So let's get
What an absolutely horrible song for a fade out. Like, I'm sorry, that was terrible. Like 99% of that song. Okay, well, my opinion is that was terrible. Objectively, I, you know, it doesn't matter. But like, oh man, they had such a vibe going, and they could have kept that going for like another 3 minutes. Yeah, that fade out, blech, ugh, not a fan. Fade outs are fine, but that, yucky. That seems to be a thing with me. Like I'll listen to a Sleep Token song and then it'll get to the end, and then I'm just like, why do they do that? Like what the heck? But despite that one criticism, which I feel a bit fiery about, they're, but who cares? That was a dope song. That's probably my favorite Sleep Token song so far. And other than that, I really don't have a thing I don't like about it. Now, one last thing. I've been recording for 30 minutes. That's really long. One last thing I want to talk to you about is, okay, well, what do you do if you want to approach high vocal distortion, high screams, right? Well, I have some thoughts on this. There are people, we've all seen them on the internet, who are just really good at this, and they don't really need vocal lessons, and they just kind of find their way. Chances are, if you've watched this long and you haven't pushed the back button while I'm talking about this, that's not you. And it wasn't me either. I was not naturally talented at metal vocals at all. I had to put in a lot of work. But there are a couple things that I think you should do first. I think that if like, you're the type of person who you've tried to scream, it's been very, very difficult. You always feel like something's not quite right. It either sounds good and hurts, or it feels good but doesn't sound right. I would highly advise focusing on your mids first. And I would highly advise just focusing on the basics of breath support and the basics of staying relaxed. Maybe even doing a little bit of singing, right? Just like, if you can stay relaxed through that whole space, that's a really good foundation for you. That's just a good thing to have in general. When it comes to your high screams, right? That's a really good thing in general. Then, maybe I'd find some just basic like mid distortion. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Does it sound cool? Who fucking cares? It's relaxed, it's steady, it's forward, right? You can do all the cool tone work and the tongue stuff. You can do all that later. Then from there, I would focus on, honestly, one really good thing that you can do is you can use your just airflow, right? You can use your airflow and you can move your airflow around and pay attention to what sort of tension you may be getting, right? So if I'm here, super relaxed, when I'm doing that, I'm not feeling a whole lot of squeeze inside of my throat. There is a little bit of narrowing at the top of the throat. And again, my larynx is lifting, but it's nothing that would cause me to feel tired really at all, right? And then from there, I can start approaching that high space with tiny little bits of interjection of distortion, right? So let's say I've learned how to do the basics of like he ho wa eh, right? So I'm here he ho wa he ho wa. Is that a high scream yet? No, it's kind of transitional and it kind of sounds a little messy, but it's comfortable and it's controlled. That's okay then. He ha okay, now we're getting somewhere. Once that's comfortable. Now, to be clear, this is one way to do one type of high vocal. There are many different types of high vocals. This one is super open, super relaxed, and builds on like a false chord sound. You can do like tighter, more like arytenoidal stuff. You can do like all sorts of fry stuff, really whatever you want. But the fundamentals, regardless of the type of scream you're going to do, are equally important. Proper breath support, learning how to create distortion without unnecessary tension, and then of course, shifting resonance and moving the placement of your voice. Placement is kind of a slippery term, but moving the placement of your voice is really beneficial as well. So I think that's that for that video. I've got a meeting here pretty soon, actually, with my tax person. So it's tax time. So you got to pay your taxes, I guess. That's what they tell me. So beyond that, if you like the content, like, share, and subscribe. It means a lot. If you're interested in vocal lessons, if you want to learn how to make some cool harsh sounds, let me know. Toss me an email. Or, well, actually, the best thing to do would be to go to carterboxacademy.com. Check out the website. Send us some information, and we'll see if we can get started. But as always, that was Sleep Token. Vore, thank you for your time. Many thanks. Much love. I'm out.